So welcome everyone to the Nurse Policy Entrepreneur Cafe. If this is your first time, I'm so happy to see you. My name is Grace Kistner. I co-facilitate this space with Angelique and Michael and Alicia and Ruthie. And we have some other names here that are regulars that support our mission. And we are a collective collaborative space. I already shared about this psychologically safe space, so just want to let you know, please feel free to answer and ask any questions that you have throughout. I'll let Elizabeth Madigan here, who's our speaker today, open up questions during her presentation or afterwards. And if there are questions in between, we will make some edits to cut that out to keep that safe space. Our collaborative foundation, we are based upon, Michael introduced this, cafe in the sense of the foundation of Parsi's human becoming theory. And that just means that this cafe style, this very informal, friendly, professional style that we have here is meaningful evolution of identity. Our nursing professional development as nurse policy entrepreneurs, that's what we're all here to learn from each other and grow together. And that means that we have a co-creation and community building of this deep democracy in this group mentorship space. And we fully believe that all nurses and all nursing students at all levels and all settings around the world should have open, affordable, and accessible access to these kinds of spaces. We develop not what policy like even individual policies are, or the individual spaces in which you can engage to influence policy, but how to develop the knowledge, confidence, abilities, and skills to approach policy. How do we have that personal, professional development to grow, to be able to have the poise and work with other professions across other sectors to engage in influencing policy from any level, whether it's right in your nursing ward where you work at the bedside or all the way up to the global levels. We do this in the cafe style by kind of having this dialoguing and listening, to expand our minds, our horizons and our thinking, challenge others in a positive way, challenge our own thinking, maybe get even more rooted in what we thought before, or completely change our approach. And that's how we have this group mentorship to explore other ways that other nurses have done things successfully. We contemplate and construct, and it creates this really innovative exchange of ideas. That's the environment that we're providing for you today. You can find on our website some of the essential elements that we've kind of come up with and somewhat categorized. You might categorize these in other ways than we do, but these are the different types of ways that nurses need to grow skills, the different types of skill sets that we need to be able to engage in this way. And you can visit our website to look more about this and resources that we can point you to and be a springboard to deep dive into your hot button issue as well. Other things that you'll find on our website are our community forum. This is a Google group that you can share and continue the conversation after every cafe. We'll also share the link later on in today's session in the chat. You can add yourself to our Global Cafes networking map, and that's just where you can share who you are, where you are, your nurse policy entrepreneur development journey, and connect with others. And then you can also follow us on LinkedIn, where we share a lot of really cool stuff. I will now be so happy to pass it over to Elizabeth Madigan, a name that I've known for so long and admired and only just recently met. And I'm so happy that she was willing to speak with us today. You have a bio that I can't even it's so long. It's so impressive. Yeah. I'll let you share what you are most happy and proud about today. And then I will go ahead and let you share your screen and get started with however you want to give us the information and background and what you're learning and sharing about mentorship and sponsorship and preceptorships and all these different ships that we need to get on, what the differences with them and how we can grow together. Thank you so much, Liz, for being here today.
Of course, my pleasure, Grace. Thanks for asking. So I am so honored to be with you all. I'll do a quick bio in reverse chronological order. So I'm currently not working full-time for pay. People sometimes call that retirement. I think I call it preferment. So I do what I prefer, when I prefer, with whom I prefer. What I'm currently doing is on Friday mornings, I am at our local free clinic as a volunteer RN, back to clinical practice, and I love it. So it's been great to get back. The other thing I do is I have a small business with two colleagues working on advancing scholarship and research in places where there aren't a lot of resources. So we work with folks on grant writing, how to publish, and some of those kinds of things. If you're ever at all interested in having one of my colleagues talk on a policy cafe about some of these things, I'm sure they'd be glad to do that. The other thing I've done is I am a board certified coach. So I did a coaching program as part of my coaching program that included being coached, coaching two people, recording those, getting feedback on that. And I forget how many hours, I should know this off the top of my head, a certain number of hours of sort of classroom work on coaching. I went into coaching thinking, oh, I know what this is. Oh, no, I didn't. So that's been really rewarding to learn that. So I've been doing coaching, individual coaching mostly for personal development. There's sort of two kinds of coaching. One is coaching for performance, which is sometimes when people hear the word coaching, that can have a bad connotation because that sometimes means you have a performance improvement problem you need to deal with. I don't do that kind. I do the coaching for personal development. I guess I could do that kind, but I prefer not to. It's just not my style, I guess. In reverse chronological order from there. Before I went into preferment, I was the CEO of Sigma Theta Tau for 6 years. And so that's where I met some of you. And that was a delightful position. I got to know a lot of people and do a lot of really good work. So I was really proud of my time there. Before that, I was 21 years at Case Western Reserve, Francis Payne Bolton School of Nursing in Cleveland as a faculty member. I also ran their WHO Collaborating Center for Home Care Nursing. And that's where I really started in global health. So I ran that for 16 years. So I've been in global health in some capacity for close to 30, I guess. And I've made a lot of really good connections with folks, and I'm really humbled by how much good work gets done, right? It's just great for that. So I'm catching up on the chat here. Okay, good. All right, good. So thank you. That's very helpful for me to know sort of what kinds of things you're interested in and working on. Before that, my clinical background was in home care. So I was a home care nurse, ran an agency, was an assistant vice president for nursing at a young age in a community medical center group. And so I've done a lot of different kinds of things. So I'm really happy. I've been a nurse for 40 something years. It's not 50, I know that, but it's 40 something. I just can't remember 40 what. So why do I talk about this mentoring, coaching, precepting, and sponsors? Because I think that we all need to give more thought to who's on our development team. No one really does this work alone. I think most of us know what sponsors are, and we probably know what preceptors are, but I really want to talk about some of the other things because I think it's important for us to think about who's on our team, how do we build that team, and then what's the benefits for us, and then what responsibilities do we have to other people. So, oh, thanks. This is great. Great, good. Thanks for doing filling in the chat piece. That's really helpful for me. I'm going to share my screen here. All right, and let me get this here. There we go. If you want to know about my initials, I have more that I can share with you at some point, but that's really sort of not why I'm here. The board certified coach thing. And when we talk about coaching, I think one of the things you want to look for is somebody who has a certification. If you decide you want to coach, coaching is unregulated. So you could hang your shingle out tomorrow and call yourself a coach. It's just that kind of initiative, I guess. I don't know that I want to call it a program because there's lots of different kinds of coaches, and that's what I mean. It's unregulated. So you got to be really thoughtful. I don't have any disclosures. I want you to think about who's on your leadership team. So when you're developing as a leader, and this is regardless of where you are in your career, when you're developing as a leader, who's on your team to help support you? So I think we mostly often think about mentors, right? And so a mentor is a generally more experienced person who provides advice and guidance, most often for career-oriented issues. So notice that I say generally more experienced. I don't say older, because a mentor could be someone much younger than you, but has more experience in an area that you're new to. So I was thinking about this group in particular. If you were going to do work with a legislative group, whether it's a Ministry of Health or however you're organized in your country, you may want to work with somebody who's 30 years old, because they could be your mentor because they have maybe 8 years experience in working with a legislature and they understand how things work. So don't think about mentors as only being older than you. You could have mentors who are much younger than you. Mentoring, usually you have a structured set of meetings. These are generated by the mentee. Mentors don't chase people down for the most part. So if you say, will you be my mentor? And I say, yes, I wait to hear from you. I don't like reach out and say, what's going on, and do those kinds of things. That's not what mentoring is. The mentee is the one who generates that. The mentee generates also sort of the topics and what's going on. The mentor may have some ideas that they bring forward during the meeting, but generally it's the mentee who's generating sort of both the context, how often, and what you talk about. Whose best interest? That's the mentees. And I'll explain why this whose best interest is important. And then sources of mentors. Well, a lot of times it's from your professional network or personal network. Don't underestimate people who are a little farther removed from you. A lot of times we think about mentors being someone with whom we have a close relationship, when in fact your best mentor may be one more degree away from that. So we'll talk a little bit about that too. I want you to think about two kinds of mentors. One is a step ahead mentor. So this is a person who's one step ahead of where you are now, and it's where you want to be next. So if I was a early career nurse and I wanted to be a nurse manager, or there's lots of different terms, but it's a person who's in charge of that unit or that ward. For that, what I would do is I would be looking for somebody who's in that position currently, not necessarily the one where I'm working, not the unit where I'm working, but maybe another unit where that person could be my step ahead mentor. And that you would reach out to them and sort of ask about, how's this going? A senior mentor is somebody who's more accomplished in advance for where you might want to be someday. It's a longer term kinds of things, but you really need both. Preceptors, I think we all know what preceptors are. They have different terms. This is the one that's the hardest one to translate internationally because it has a different term in lots of different places. So a preceptor is an experienced practitioner of some kind who helps you get into a new role. So if you're going into a practice setting and you're going into, I'll just use an oncology unit, for example, that organization will assign a preceptor, somebody who you follow, you practice with, tells you how things work on that unit in that institution. And so the preceptor is not somebody you choose, it's somebody who's assigned by the organization. These are generally very structured. And remember, in whose best interest? This is the organization's best interest. So do they care about how you do? Absolutely. But if push comes to shove, it's the organization whose best interest they're thinking about. You could also have a preceptor in an academic setting. I've seen this called a mentor, and I'll use air quotes on that because a mentor is someone the mentee chooses. I think what happens in academic settings, it's really an academic preceptor. So the school or the university assigns someone to help you learn the role and get into the system. So sponsor. So a sponsor, this is the one that's least known in nursing, I think. When I bring this up, people are like, yeah, I don't think I've ever heard that term. And that's why I really want you to think about this. A sponsor is somebody in an influential position who identifies and puts somebody forward for career advancement. It could be a job, could be a board position, it could be an award, but they're persons of influence, right? They're talent scouts is the best way to think about them. So these are people, and you may not know you're being scouted. These are people who sort of watch and sort of see, oh, who's doing what over here and who might be good for this kind of thing. And so a lot of times you don't know that they're watching what you're doing. You may not meet with them. This is not like there's anything structured. It's certainly in your best interest for possible new opportunities, but talent scouts find you. Some people like to approach folks to sort of see if they'll be a sponsor, but that has to be a very delicate approach. And here's why. If I sponsor somebody, and I have sponsored people, it's my social capital being put at risk. So if I sponsored someone and they do a terrible job or they do something unethical or something, the reflection is not just on them, it's also on me. So people who are sponsors are pretty careful about who they're sponsoring because they don't want it to come back on them if things don't go well. Now, sometimes things don't go well just because it's not a good fit and some of those things. That's different. But this is where a sponsor is somebody who's watching to sort of see who could be good for what. And like I said, it's the one that I think nursing spends the least time on. And so it's always been surprising to me that we haven't, I think there are people who do it intuitively and naturally, but I think there's an obligation, and I have this at the end. I think there's an obligation for people in influential positions and positions of influence and authority and power to be sponsoring people. We need to bringing along the next generation of folks in these leadership positions. And I don't think we've done a very good job, frankly, in terms of leadership succession for many things. And then a coach. So the coaching is different from all of these. And I have a diagram that I worked on that I'm continually tweaking. That'll be next to sort of make the differentiation. But a coach is someone who assists you with finding your highest, best life. So that's personal and professional. There are regular meetings for sure. It's definitely your best interest in mind. I've already talked about credentials and the need for credentials. And there are multiple kinds of coaches. So, you have coaches for career coaching. You have coaches for wellness coaching. That's not the kind I do, by the way. You have coaches who are executive coaches. So in some organizations, the senior nursing leadership will have an executive coach. And this is someone who works with them on how it's going, how they're doing, what they need, what are their struggles, what kinds of things are they doing about their struggles. But coaches don't offer advice. Coaches actually, because, I could coach people in the fintech system, in the fintech sector. I don't know anything about that, but I could coach them, right? So it's because it's really not about the content or the knowledge of the area in which they're working. It's really about how it's going, what they need, what they're learning about themselves, what they're learning about other people. And coaches ask a lot of questions. Coaches may make observations, but for the most part, they ask questions, and they're really focused on how it's going and what could be better. The other thing that's different is coaches charge. This is fee-based. Some organizations, and it was striking to me in the coaching program I was in, some organizations send people through coaching programs to become certified coaches because they use them internally to help people who are wanting to move up or people who are in positions where they need some support. So this is where it's interesting to me that I haven't seen that as much in healthcare. And I don't see it much in nursing. There are a lot of nurse coaches, really surprising number, especially people in my point in my career. Because I think what's so rewarding about coaching in the same way that nursing is rewarding is you actually see people's growth, right? When the process works and everybody's doing what they need to do, you can see people make amazing changes in their lives. And so it's very rewarding. I'm pretty convinced that adults need to probably have a coach and just walk through some of these things every 5 to 10 years. I think what happens is we start going along with our lives, and sometimes our positions change, but it's sort of a subtle change. And before you know it, we're no longer a really good fit for the work we're doing, or the work we're doing no longer is consistent with our values. Or maybe we've just done that. And so we've done that kind of work. We feel like we've mastered it. We're ready for something new. But there's some career inertia for lots of good reasons that get in our way. So it's really good also for people who are in transitions of some kind. So if you're looking for what's next for me, even if it's 10 years down the road, it's a good time to get a coach to sort of walk through those things. So here's the diagram I tried to put together to try to make the differentiation. I'll start with mentors, because I think it's the one that most people understand better. Mentors could be sponsors. I mean, if you have a mentor who's in an influential position, they could also function as a sponsor. They also could use a coaching kind of approach in terms of how they do things, but they're definitely not preceptors. Now, if they're a preceptor, they could become a mentor at some point, but definitely not a preceptor. Mentors give advice. Remember that piece. Sponsors could be mentors, but there's definitely not preceptors, and they're definitely not coaches. Preceptors don't do any of these things, right? Preceptors are focused on the organization, getting you into the role, making sure that you have what you need to do your job, because that's what preceptors do. But they're not your mentor in that role. They may become a mentor later, but not necessarily. Coaches may also provide mentoring. So some coaches do a little mentoring, even though in its purest sense, coaching is not supposed to be mentoring, but they're definitely not sponsors and they're definitely not preceptors. Coaching has a confidentiality agreement, whereas the coach doesn't share who they're coaching. The person being coached can share with anybody, but there's a confidentiality because it can be these can be very in-depth discussions, and there are things that a coach learns that of course they can't share because that would be unethical. So I hope this helps. And I do have I have a QR code at the end. And oh, by the way, Arik, the QR code actually works in Grace. Those of you who are at the ICN thing where the QR code didn't work, it now works. So I want to ask you who's on your team, and you can think about this. Do you have a step ahead mentor? Do you have a senior mentor? Do you have a preceptor that's time limited generally? Do you have a coach? Do you need a coach? Do you have a sponsor? You may not know you're being scouted for talent, by the way. And then the other thing is in your personal developmental network, do you have cheerleaders? So cheerleaders are the people who, no matter what you think about, they're like, that's a great idea, go for it, right? These are the people who are always on your side, always positive, always confident you can do what you need, right? And so I can say, hey, I think I'm going to go rob a bank. And my cheerleaders will go, Liz, go. But what you really need, you need at least one truth teller, right? So this is the person when you go to and you say, I have this idea. They're the ones who are going to be honest with you and say, yeah, I actually don't see you in that position. If I went to my truth teller and said, I've decided I'm going to become an Olympic pole vaulter, they're going to be the ones who go, yeah, no, no, not going to happen, right? So you need truth tellers in your life too. So I want you to think about some of these folks as, now I expect your mentors are going to be more cheerleaders than truth tellers, but some mentors are truth tellers too. And that's important because if you say, I have this career aspiration, they're the ones who are going to say, yeah, well, that's possible, but you can't do it with the credentials you have now. You would need additional credentials. So just sort of consider these things in your leadership development. I'm asked a lot, how do you find these folks? Here's how you don't find them. This is my phone. Will you be my mentor? Now, I know that sounds silly, but I actually had a couple people tell me that early career folks reached out to them via text and said, would you be my mentor? And they wanted to do the mentoring via text. I have trouble envisioning how that works because I think there's so much of the nonverbals when you're in a mentoring relationship. Now, I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just having trouble with it. But I also know if you approach a senior person via text to be your mentor, you're probably not going to get much of a response. So where do you find step ahead mentors? Workplace or professional network? I would say this group is a great place to find a step ahead mentor. Senior mentors, again, professional network. Ask them if they'll be your mentor. It's okay to ask. And a lot of times somebody who's being asked to be a mentor would want to know what their time commitment is. So if you say, I'm really interested in and I'm wondering if you would be my mentor, and I anticipate reaching out to you maybe once a quarter, every 3 months, and for about an hour, and I can let you know when that works and when that doesn't work. And just give them some sense about what you're looking for. Coaches you can find through internet searches or other people. A lot of the nurse coaches are on LinkedIn, so you might find people there. And then sponsors are senior people. So if you have someone that you think that you would like them to sponsor you, you can't really say, would you be my sponsor? What you can do is do a gentle introduction and conversation and let them know what you're working on and what you're interested in. If you're asking for people to actually do things for you, it's more mentoring than sponsorship. So I hope that makes sense, but there's some Venn diagram there. I firmly believe that every nurse should be mentoring someone. And this is where I have early career nurses say, I can't mentor somebody, I'm just new myself. Yes, you can mentor somebody. You can mentor students, right? You know more than students do. And I also feel like senior leaders should be talent scouts. So if you're in a position of influence or authority or knowledge, you really should be a talent scout. You should be looking for people you can put forward. I love this quote by Winston Churchill. We make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. I think that really captures a lot of this. There's the QR code. I'll leave that up for a second. And at the very end, I'll put up my email and my LinkedIn. All right. I think I'm going to stop. Well, I'm going to do the next slide and then I can go back and put the LinkedIn code up. So yeah, I'm under LinkedIn, Elizabeth Madigan, easy to find. And then my email is firstname.lastname@gmail.com. Try to keep it easy. All right. I'm going to get caught up on the.
We have so much happening in the chat. This is a really,
know.
really active group. This is great. I just want to, first of all, thank you. This is really, I think, helpful. I think
Good.
I've seen a lot of people in the chat share they hadn't heard of a sponsor or thought about a sponsorship in this sense. I
Mhm.
like how you've discussed how some of these positions are paid and more formal, and sometimes they're a little informal, they're messy, they overlap, and it kind of
Mhm.
comes back together to how we've approached some of this cafe and community. And Michael just wrote on complex adaptive systems, and it really is this like fine balance of like what do I need when, what can I provide when, how do these things overlap? It's such a big ball of stuff, right?
I really appreciate the comments. I do want to call out Devon's that where she says, I say the mentor prepares you to be in the room, the sponsor brings you into the room. I think that captures it greatly, Devon. That's exactly what's going on there. I I'm a big fan of LinkedIn for that. Because I think LinkedIn used well and used correctly is a great place for sponsors to sort of see, oh, that's really interesting. That's somebody who I want to keep in mind for this or that. Sponsors, I think, are really focused on and are focused on institutionally within their organization, sort of who's a person who has some leadership abilities that I could put forward for a leadership position of some kind in it within their organization, right? So within their practice setting or within their academic setting. I also think within organizations, I think it's important. So if you're, I'll just use oncology since that seems to be what's on my mind today. If you're on the Oncology Nursing Society, this is where you want to get involved with committees and and do a good job in terms of showing up and doing the work, because a lot of times people who are in organizational leadership positions, that's where they're looking for. That's where those talent scouts are looking within those committees about which committees are doing well, who's doing a lot of good work, because it's a really good way to sort of say, how's this person doing? A lot of times when I'm sponsoring somebody, I do that kind of thing. And then I also want to talk to them individually, right? So a lot
Right.
of times I'll try to find them in the exhibit hall or in a committee meeting or something and sort of say, so tell me what you're working on. What are you interested in? What are you looking forward to do? Just to get a sense about who they are as a person. I feel really grateful that most of the people I've sponsored, it's worked out great. So I've expended my social capital wisely. Periodically it doesn't, and sometimes it's just because it's not a good fit. I read it wrong, right? I read the person was going to be a strong contributor in some way, but it didn't fit for them or it didn't fit for the group. It happens. So that was where my social capital wasn't at risk. It just didn't work. So what if the mentor doesn't work? What if it's not working? Because here's what happens. You get a mentor at one point in your career, and as you develop, you may outgrow them, right? You may become a peer where they're no longer a mentor, but a peer. And so some people feel like you need to do a formal, you're no longer my mentor. I don't know that you need to do that. I don't know that you need to do that. I mean, I have people who said, "Would you be my mentor?" I'm like, "Yeah," and we meet a couple times, and then I don't hear from them, and I don't take any offense at that. I figured they've either found somebody else, or they're going in a different direction, or my mentoring didn't work for them. It's all good, right? So you don't necessarily have to take action, if the mentoring is no longer working for you. But that's why it's also important to have multiple mentors. So people in academic positions, I think in practice positions too, but in an academic position, you need a mentor internal to that organization, to that school and that university about how things work. But it's also really helpful to have senior mentors who are not in that organization, because just because it works in your place doesn't mean it's going to work the same way someplace else. Right. And I think that's true organizationally too. So if you're in a academic health system, or if you're in a community health system of some kind, public health department, you want to mentor internally, but you probably also want to mentor externally, because, just because you've seen one means you've seen one, right? So, because it should be generated by the mentee, right? So if you're an early career nurse who wants to be a mentor, I think making sure that you provide opportunities to meet with student nurses, for example, and then let them sort of get to know you. I think there's always some reluctance, especially early career folks of any kind, to reach out to more senior people. I can't tell you how many times people are like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm meeting you," and I'm like, "Well, I sort of just like you. I had to put my shoes on one at a time, right?" And so I may have had influential positions, but it doesn't mean that I'm any better or different. I just have more experiences of some kind, right? So think about it from that perspective. Most people, when you approach them to be a mentor, are actually honored to be asked. I think that's an important thing, is that, people are like, "Oh, I don't want to bother these really important people." Well, most people, if you ask them if you're going to be a mentor and you say, "I need about an hour every quarter," they do. "Oh, that's 4 hours a year. Yeah, I can do that." Right. So I think that's the thing. So I think the tendency is to not want to ask, where what I'm trying to tell you is it's really okay to ask. Right. So
I became a nurse when I was 50, so I was older. I had done a lot of other things, and um, I learned things the hard way. I didn't have direction. I created my own direction. So how I learned generally was I trailed debris. I didn't know how to go about this. And so anything that I learned was accidental, although I learned it really well.
mhm.
Um, would you, to be a mentor mentee, I think it'd be really important to figure out how to be each of those. Do you know of any resources, or did you find any way that helped you define and articulate in your mind how to go about each of those roles? Because they are separate and they are unique, but I think it's important to understand how to do each, because you could flop between the two, like you were mentioning, real quickly. You could go from mentor to mentee real quick. And so, and that's why we do the Parsi's theory of human becoming, because there's this constant emerging now. There's not
Mhm.
this rigid linear thing. So do you have any resources or ways that we can point people to help?
There are certainly there are certainly resources about how to be a good mentor. There are fewer resources about how to be a good mentee. And I think that's equally important, because, like I said, when I have people who say, "Will you be my mentor?" and then I don't hear from them again, I'm like, "Oh, okay." And I'm never sure what to think about that, right? And so I think even if they came back and said, "Oh, I've decided I'm changing my path," or whatever, that's fine. But you don't have to make it like a formal "you're fired" kind of thing, right? You can just sort of let it dwindle. But I think that to be a good mentee, first of all, remember, it's up to you as the mentee to reach out to the mentor. They're not going to chase you around. In a true mentoring relationship, the mentor doesn't chase you down. It helps if you're going to be in the same place physically at some point, to actually schedule meetings with folks. So I think this is particularly helpful for if you're in maybe a clinical specialty of some kind, and your mentor is someone who's not in your organization, but they're probably going to be at, like, the Oncology Nursing Society meeting. You might reach out to them and set up some time and say, "Could we have some coffee?" I think you want to make sure, sometimes these can be, like Grace said, some of these mentoring meetings can be pretty wide ranging. Other times you may have a specific thing in mind. So I have a mentee who I've been working with on promotion and tenure for, well, I was on his doctoral dissertation, so I think it's probably 10 years now. And so he reaches out to me when he has specific questions about promotion and tenure. And I'm pretty clear about that's what the meeting's going to be about, right? And so he lets me know what's going on, and then asks for advice, and I tell him what I know and what I think. So that's a very sort of there's no surprises with that mentee. I have other mentees who reach out to me and say, do you have time to talk? I say, sure. Is there anything I need to do prepared? No. And we get on, and they're just sort of wide ranging about, I'm not sure where I'm going. I think I'm okay where I am, but I need to talk it through. So, and those are the kinds of conversations we have. We just sort of go along like that. That's okay too. That's okay too. I think Becky's got a good point there. When she's asked to be a mentor, she asks what they want to learn from her. And she says a lot of times they want a cheerleader and not a mentor. Right. I think that's exactly right, Becky. So sometimes as a mentor, I might say, why me? What do I have to offer that you're looking for? I get a lot of requests about global health mentoring. And I said, well, that's a huge topic area. What kind of thing are you specifically interested in? Is there something in particular? Because maybe I'm not the right person. If you want to work at WHO, I'm probably not the right person to mentor you for that because I've never worked at WHO. I know what the system's like from the outside, but I've never worked at WHO. So I think those are the kinds of things that you're wanting to think about in terms of as a mentee. What are you looking for that person? And some mentors may ask. I really think that in nursing, we have not done a great job of that, bringing the next generation along. I don't know if that's a function of some people have had to fight so hard to get where they are. They don't want to take a risk about losing their spot. I mean, I'm at the place in life, and because I'm on my own, organizationally, right? So you don't like my coaching thing, that's fine. I don't have anything to lose there. But I do think that there's been some tendency to, I don't want to bring people along because they may take my position. They're worried about losing their own positions or losing their own power and influence. And I think it's really harmed us as a profession. And some of it, I think I think the sociologists would say it's a function of the kinds of lateral violence as nurses that we've done with each other too, right? Some of this is the sociologic phenomenon. I don't claim to be an expert in that, but I know enough about it to recognize it. So I think as much as we can get beyond that and realize that a rising tide lifts all boats, right? And just because I bring somebody along doesn't mean that my position's at risk. I think this is where if we can get that word out more and more and more, because for this group, I think you all are in the same page I am. I mean, we're all just going to nod our heads and go, this is absolutely what's going on, right? But I think in the larger nursing community, I'm not sure that people are as attuned to it as you all and we are. So, all right, great. Grace, go ahead.
So many great nuggets of wisdom in this conversation. I just want to, call out, Angelique, what you said, that authenticity piece and integrity piece. You have to get interested. Just if you don't know about something, but you know that you're interested in it, read about it, write about it, talk about it. Michael says this all the time. Do it so much that it becomes a piece of you, and that is what you're putting out into the world and everything that you do. And that if you don't have to come up with a pitch, like a practiced speech, right? Like it becomes so much of a part of you that at any moment with anyone you could talk and speak to it with that true authentic and piece of integrity. And I think that's something very unique to nursing in the sense that it's connected to how we're trusted and how we show up professionally. And I also just want to call out something that I heard this morning. Somebody sent it. Roger, you might have seen it in our group chat. There's a video clip where the person was speaking and said, a true leader does not maintain followers. And that's in the sense of you're always supposed to be lifting up and moving on to allow the next person to come in so that we are all leaders, right? So I thought that was really on point for today. But maybe I can ask you to go a little bit further, Liz, what you think your best response is to that developing. How do you get started, right? Like you can tell somebody, go watch, learn, listen, read, and start to talk about it yourself, write about yourself. But some people they see that little glimpse of inspiration and they haven't thought about it yet. They haven't researched it for themselves yet. And they're like, oh, that looks really cool. How do I do that? So how do you approach somebody when you don't have those specific questions to ask? And how do you just ask someone to have an exploratory conversation like that? And then maybe a second part of that afterwards, in some of these different ways, mentors, preceptors, sponsors, how much and when for each one, and it might look different, is it important to nurture that relationship between your meetings or your points of communication? Do you have to have a constant relationship with every one of those people? Or is it sometimes okay just to say, hey, you're the person I go to for this one thing. We don't talk about a lot else. We don't maintain the relationship in between. But when is it okay to only reach out to that person when you have a very specific question about that topic?
Yeah, so I'll back up with one step with the transparency piece. I think when you're seeking someone to be a mentor, you want to make sure there's chemistry there. And so I think that's, I think it goes back to Angelique's relationship stuff, right? I think it's important to feel like this is somebody you can have a relationship with. And that's why I think trying to get a mentor with a phone, right, is not the way to do it. Because I think that you need to make sure there's a chemistry and an affinity there. I think that's why in some cases, this is why in most people in an academic place had an instructor that they felt an affinity for, right? And it was a chemistry thing. It was their personality, their approach to life, all those kinds of things, right? So I think that chemistry piece is really important. Don't underestimate that. Grace, in answer to sort of some of your comments, I think it's okay with some folks to make it like, when I have a question about X, I reach out to this person and this person knows that and they're okay with it. But I think it's okay to check this out, right? With that person and sort of to say, when I reach out to you, David, I realize I reach out to you when I have specific questions. Is that okay? Or is there another way you want me to approach this? Right? I mean, open the conversation up. In some cases, those relationships that start with a one topic thing evolve into more, just naturally, organically, right? It's not because you're wanting it to. It's because it's just how it goes, right? So I think that's where to be open to that relationship in whatever way it evolves, right? For some folks, it's going to develop into a mentoring kinds of thing. And for other folks, it's always going to be that one topic piece. I think the other thing is to, and I've had people do this and I really appreciate it when I'm mentoring them. They reach out and they say things like, I realize I'm asking a lot of you. Is there anything I can do for you? Right? So it's somebody said it earlier. It's not just take, right? It's also what you have to give, because I learn a lot from people that I mentor, right? Because they'll be talking about something and I'll be like, I had no idea, right? I had no idea it worked that way. So I learn a lot too. I think the other piece is that most people, especially the initial approach, most people like to talk about their lives, right? So if you're approaching someone that you don't really know, and you can say sort of, I don't really know much about the kind of work you do. Can you tell me what your average day is like? Right? You can get a sense, you can learn more about whatever that topic is for that in that person's expertise, right? And a lot of times it leads to naturally the next kinds of questions. So I would encourage you to sort of go into it with an inquisitive mindset. And even if it doesn't go anywhere, right? It's still an interaction worth having. Right. And this is where I would encourage you, if you're not sure, take the risk, right? Take the risk, because you're not going to know unless you try. You have to put yourself forward. You feel a little vulnerable. That's okay. Sometimes 90% of the time it's going to be fun. 10% of the time, maybe not. Yeah, so what I've done, not when I was in the academic setting, because I was there so long. I mean, I started as a brand new assistant professor, so I didn't really do it there. But when I went into the Sigma job, what I realized, first of all, CEO positions are very lonely positions, right? When you're in those senior leadership positions, you don't really have anybody to talk to, right? I mean, so the people who were reporting to me could, if they were upset, they could talk with each other and work things out. I couldn't do that, right? And so in the same way, when you got into the consulting world, you sort of lost that group of people that you could talk things through with, right? So what I ended up doing is I think it's considered peer mentoring when I think about it. I didn't know it had a term at the time, but I got acquainted with some other nursing organization CEOs, and we developed a little group. And so we would meet usually about once a month, and we'd sort of say, so what's going on? And if people were having a particular struggle, they would share it, and we'd all, brainstorm about things, or we'd ask questions, or, so we created, I would consider a peer mentoring group. And that's where, if there are other people who are doing the same kind of work you're doing, you can find those people. If you can find those people, you might consider, and we didn't call it anything. I mean, we had a name we called it, but it wasn't like we made a big formal structure out of it, right? We just sort of said, I just said, are you all interested in perhaps getting together every so often? Like Zoom, we'll do a Zoom call. And they're like, yeah. So we would do it, we'd have a set time we'd do it. It was an hour. And then in between, we'd reach out to each other if something came up, right? And so I felt like I had my people, right? Because they knew what my life was like. So I think I would ask them a lot of questions. Because I think that it's almost sort of a coaching approach, which is, so yeah, and I think to acknowledge, first of all, yes, nurses are underpaid in Rwanda. Because that's not up for discussion. It's a fact. So I think you can say, yes, nurses are underpaid. So why did you go into nursing? What is it about nursing that was appealing to you? Because that may help you and them figure out sort of what their discomfort is or their dislike is or where they're struggling. Because there are, and I mean, I think again, we can be honest about this. Some people go into nursing because it's a pretty well paid position in many places in the world, right? And so they go into it for the money. There are practical reasons to go into the profession. Many of us went into the profession because we had a more approach about, we wanted to make the world a better place, and we thought we could do that through supporting people's health in one way or another. But again, I think asking questions, figuring out where they are, and then also trying to figure out where they want to go, because that can help you figure out how to best guide them. So if they, and again, I have been around in global nursing long enough to know, some people in especially lower resource countries go into nursing with the intention of getting their nursing education and then immigrating to get higher pay and to get more opportunities for themselves and their family. I don't get into the debate about is that right or wrong. I think that's an individual decision. I think there are systemic things that we could make that more ethical, but I think an individual decision to actually do that is okay. Again, I think I would ask them questions and try to figure out what their struggles with. Are they getting into nursing because they want to go up and do progress up the career ladder? I think that would change the conversation versus something. I think you want to make sure that the work you're doing a good job at. I think the other thing is to have a social media presence, probably on LinkedIn, because that's a professional place. I know that there's some professional things on Instagram, but not as much. I think most people think about LinkedIn as being the more professional place for social media. So you may want to have a presence there. I think you want to be thoughtful in terms of what you post. If you're on LinkedIn, I think it's okay to ask questions, to sort of say, I'm a nursing student, and I, can some of you more experienced nurses answer this question for me? How is the best way to whatever, right? And so I think it's okay to ask those kinds of questions. There you go. Grace said, put yourself on the Global Cafes networking map, right? Again, you're looking for places where you can be in contact with people. Because remember, sponsors are people who have either positional power or influence of some kind. And so I think getting yourself into those kinds of conversations so that people can sort of see what you're doing, see what you're up to, but also realizing, you're probably not going to get somebody reaching out to you as a nursing student. They're going to wait until you're a nurse and they see your practice and they see sort of the things you're doing. Now, that's not exclusively true, because it could be that you're in an organizational leadership position for nursing students, where that it could be a very positive thing there. So I think there's lots of ways to do it. And so I think for you to think about sort of what's the best network for you, and how can you have interactions that are going to both you provide something and you get something back. I think this Policy Cafe is a great idea on how you do that, right? This is an informal network that you all have put together. So I think it's a great way for you to think about how you can support each other. So it's okay to have a plan, and it's important to have some kind of plan. At the same time, when opportunities come along, thoughtfully consider if they're going to expand your skill set, because that's what I found. And so the opportunities that expanded my skill set to make me more ready for this Sigma CEO job were related to budgeting and finance kinds of things, were related to boards and how you work with boards. So I had been on boards. And then I got onto a particularly challenging board and I learned a lot about organizations. And so I think all of those things contributed to me feeling like I was ready for the Sigma CEO job. I will point out that there is good evidence, and again, we can talk about these things very openly. There's good evidence that when women are thinking about taking a promotion, they feel like they have to have 100% of those skills before they even apply for a job that's a promotion. Men, on the other hand, at 60% of those skills are ready to apply for a promotion. So there's a gender difference in terms of, now this is a US study. I don't want to suggest this is outside the US, but in the US at least, most women have to feel like before they can apply for promotion, they have to have every possible thing that they need before they even apply. So I think that's the other thing to keep in mind, is that I think sometimes we put so much pressure on ourselves that if a sponsor approaches us and says, I think you'd be ideal for this position, and you say either out loud or to yourself, oh, I don't have what it takes because I don't know how to do X, Y, Z. I would encourage you to think about, do you really need to know how to do X, Y, Z? Or do you need to know how to ask the questions about X, Y, Z, right? So, I could not be a chief financial officer in an organization. I don't know enough, but I did know how to ask the questions. I did know what kinds of things were important, right? So I think keep in mind that, if a sponsor comes to you, they're seeing something that you're not seeing in yourself. And I would encourage you to not automatically shut it down either internally or to them. Because, if I come to you and I say, I think you'd be really good for this, and you say, no, I'm not ready, I may not come back to you, right? Whereas if you say, oh, really? I didn't think about that. What makes you think I could do that? Then the sponsor has the opportunity to say, well, haven't you done this? Haven't you done that? Haven't you done this, right? So if you shut it down automatically, the conversation's over. Whereas if you maintain that sort of curiosity about, oh, because people do see things in us that we don't see in ourselves. I can tell you that.
And the thing that drove me to start this, I think one of the things was reading that article, The Future of Nursing. And in that, one of the recommendations was that nurses must become full partners with physicians and other disciplines and thought leaders. And so our cafe started with the idea of what's preventing us from doing that. What are the skill sets? But it's beyond that. We have in our profession, we have a particular perspective as thinkers. And we bring to the table is not just coalition building and, some of this skills. We have the ability and the opportunity to bring a different thought, a different perspective to these policy-making bodies. And that's what we should be focusing on. How do we change these paradigms that have created poor healthcare? Whatever country you're in, we could do better. And I think as nurses, our perspective is unique enough to where thought leadership will become the thing that draws us into those boardrooms, into those policy making. It's changing the way that people think about things. And I think that's going to be our power. It's not just getting the skill sets to get at the table. It's understanding that things are built out of systems, becoming systems thinkers so that our solutions are really successful. They're not just hitting one thing or another thing. They're really successful. And I'm so excited about what the future holds from this cafe, because that's where we're going. We're going into developing thought leaders. We're the Orc Cloud for thought leadership, and we're going to be changing. I sure hope we do. That's my vision anyways.
Well, and I think it's not only we have the capabilities and capacity and knowledge, Michael. I would add that we have an obligation to do this, right? And I think that's the other piece. Is it's because, again, I think we can talk ourselves out of taking this kind of action because we're like we think we don't know enough. I think the other piece we bring as nurses is, remember, in the healthcare workforce around the world, nurses and midwives are half of the healthcare workforce around the world, right? Nurses and midwives. And midwives are a smaller percentage, of course, but we're half of it. So why, for example, and I don't know the current numbers at WHO, I can give you an estimate, but WHO staff, and this is before they do any of their restructuring, to my knowledge, the last time I knew the actual number for sure, had 4 nurses on staff at WHO. So this is why I think that, you know, if we're half of the healthcare workforce, there should be more than 4 of us at WHO. There were more, at one time, more nutritionists than there were nurses at WHO. So just, and again, I'm not picking on WHO, I'm just giving you that as an example. I think there's other organizations we could say the same thing about. So I think we need to, again, think broadly in terms of what our opportunities are to make contributions. It's also a great way to learn boards, how boards work. It's a great way to learn about your community and who's influential in your local community, because a lot of these board things have influential people on these boards. I mean, there's a lot of reasons to say yes to these kinds of opportunities if you're approached, right? Because the initial thought is, I don't know anything about housing. No, no, I'm sorry, I can't do that. Well, you know, you actually could maybe learn a lot, right? And you might have a lot to offer that you're not thinking about too. So
I hope that this is just one other example of how we can see ourselves as nurses, like see someone doing the thing and then see ourselves in that position and be able to aspire and reach in different directions that we didn't expect that we would when we started our nursing careers. And that's really what I'm passionate about and trying to foster in this community, is having that. It's almost like, you know, go back to nursing school, go back to your skills lab, do return demonstration, know one, see one, do one, like modeling of one nurse has done something in one way, and that is really cool and inspiring. And now that inspires someone else to go and do the thing, or feel comfortable and confident in whatever thing they want to do and place themselves and their lens, their experience in. So thanks for such a great conversation.
my pleasure. My pleasure. It was great to be here.